Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video, we're going to take a look at the Week 4 Thursday Night Football Showdown slate on Draftkings. Now, for Week 4, we don't have the best game this week. We got Thursday Night Football kicking off with the Broncos and the Jets. This game's probably the worst Thursday Night Football game that we've had over the last few years. I'm still going to watch it. I'm still going to tune in. I'm still going to be playing the Showdown slate because I love to gamble, but yeah, this is not the best game. Just a 40 total right now, which is insanely low. Right now, the Broncos are actually 2-point road favorites. So at least we're expecting a close game. You shouldn't expect a shootout here, but Vegas is expecting a close game, so it should be somewhat interesting, I guess. The Showdown slate in general is not going to be great because you're not going to feel good about a lot of guys you're rostering. I don't think I've played anyone from the Jets so far this season. I've only played a few guys from Denver so far, and that's mainly been Noah Fant, Judy, and KJ Hamler. I played last week in my main lineup. Really haven't played anyone else, though, so I haven't really been diving in too deep to these two teams. I haven't been looking at these two teams much this season. But I'll be sure to break down everything for this game, for these two teams. We'll take a look at both sides of the ball, what I like on the Denver side, what I like on the Jets side, if any. So before we do get started, guys, as always, I would appreciate it if you would hit that like button down below. If you are new to the channel, be sure to click that subscribe button as well. We are getting very close to 20,000 subscribers. We should be there pretty soon. I think last time I checked, we're like 20 subscribers away from 20,000. So I would appreciate it if you would subscribe, help us get to that goal, help us get to that big milestone. Be sure to click the notification bell as well that's next to the subscribe button. If you do that, you will get notified every time I upload. You'll never miss out on any of my new videos. And if you do want to get more content from me, if you do really enjoy these YouTube videos and they help you out, I do have more content available on Patreon. You can check that out. Link down below in the description. But yeah, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this Showdown slate. We'll start off at the top of the player pool and just kind of work our way down. So at the top, Melvin Gordon is actually our most expensive option on this slate. He is $11K at the flex, and if you want to play him at captain, he is $16,500. So we do know that Philip Lindsay is expected to play this week, I believe. He practiced in limited fashion on Tuesday, but just, if my best guess is that Philip Lindsay is most likely going to play here. Just read in the blurb right here, it says that he returned to practice in limited fashion. The running back's presence seemingly reports that, he's going to be back in action. He remains a candidate to return from a 2-game absence to play Thursday versus the Jets, but the Broncos may want to see, if he can put in a full workout on Wednesday. So, right now we don't know what Lindsay's status is going to be. I'm recording this video on Tuesday afternoon. I'm going to post it on YouTube Wednesday morning. I guess we'll get more clarity Wednesday afternoon if he's able to get a full practice in. My best guess, though, is that even if he's limited in practice on Wednesday, that he probably still plays here. So that is going to cut into Melvin Gordon's workload a bit. Whenever these two guys are healthy, I think you are going to see close to an even split between the two. Maybe Lindsay comes in a little banged up and is not 100%, so maybe you see like a 70-30 split in favor of Gordon, whereas you would normally see it be like 55-50 or 55-45, 60-40 in favor of Gordon. Gordon is still the lead back. He is still the starter. His workload isn't going to be as heavy, though. We saw him get 21 touches week 2 against Pittsburgh whenever Philip Lindsay was out. I don't think that's going to be the case this week if Lindsay plays. He did get more touches in that week 1 game because, Philip Lindsay did get hurt in that game. Last week, though, only 12 touches, just 8 carries and 4 receptions. The matchup's pretty good. The Jets, overall, their defense probably have one of the worst defenses in the league. I don't mind Gordon at $11K, but it does kind of feel like you're overpaying for him a bit. I think I would rather go to some other guys for cheaper. I feel like some of these receivers we have in the mid-range make for really good captain plays, and you can play those guys at captain and still fit in, one of the two quarterbacks, even though both quarterbacks feel way too expensive. You're still probably going to play one of the two. So yeah, Gordon's fine, but I'm probably not going to be too heavy on him, especially if Philip Lindsay does return. Now, if Philip Lindsay remains out, that's a different story. Then yeah, Gordon is a really good pay-up option, but honestly, I think I would rather play the quarterbacks over Melvin Gordon, and I know both these quarterbacks we're not going to feel too confident in. Sam Darnold for the Jets, and it looks like Brett Rypien is, I don't even know if that's how you say his name, but Brett Rypien is going to be the starter for Denver. It was Jeff Driscoll last week. Whenever Drew Lock got hurt, they announced that Jeff Driscoll was going to start. But Driscoll actually got benched last week late in the game for Rypien, and now they said that Rypien is going to be the starter for this game. So our two quarterbacks to choose from are Sam Darnold and Brett Rypien. I mean, if I have to just choose one of the two, I'm definitely leaning Sam Darnold just because I've seen Sam Darnold play. I've never seen Brett Rypien play. I didn't even know who he was till I found out that he was a backup for the Broncos. I mean, given that he was third on the depth chart behind Drew Lock and behind Jeff Driscoll, I mean, that makes me assume that he can't be good anyway. So if I have to choose one of the two quarterbacks, I do prefer Sam Darnold. I know Sam Darnold has not been good at all this year, but he's had some really brutal matchups. I mean, they've had to play the Bills, the 49ers, the Colts, all pretty good defensive teams. Denver, not nearly as good defensively as those teams, so it is a much better spot for Sam Darnold. He is most likely going to have Jamison Crowder back for this game. All signs are pointing to Jamison Crowder playing this week. Rashad Perriman's going to still be out, but Crowder will be back, so that is a weapon that Sam Darnold does like to target, and we're going to talk about Jamison Crowder. I do have a lot of interest in him. I mean, this Jets offense, they don't have a ton of weapons. Crowder's their number one receiver. Their number one running back, Le'Veon Bell, he's out right now, so, I mean, they're leaning on Frank Gore. They're leaning on, Keelan Ballage, guys that, obviously aren't going to produce much out of the backfield. Their running game in general is just not great, so I do expect them to throw the ball here. They're probably going to be playing from behind. Right now as 2-point home dogs, I mean, maybe you see them play from behind a bit in this game. I like Sam Darnold at 10-6. I haven't played Sam Darnold at all this season, not on any main slate, but this is a showdown slate. This is a totally different scenario. We just have one game. We don't have a ton of players to choose from. I definitely have interest in Sam Darnold here. I think he does put up a decent game this week. He's been brutal so far this season, but this is a much better spot back at home against a much worse defense than some of the other teams that he's played so far. So I do like Sam Darnold at 10-6. I would prefer him over Rypien. I mean, it is good. It is a good matchup for him against this Jets defense that, I mean, just don't expect them to be very good either. I just don't know much about this guy. He's 10,200. He's just so closely priced to Darnold that I would just feel more confident playing Sam Darnold. I guess, though, if you're playing one of the Broncos receivers at captain, then you could go and pair them with Rypien in that kind of build, because normally, if I'm playing a receiver at captain, I want to get his quarterback in there, because if that receiver, for example, like a Noah Fant or a KJ Hamler or Jerry Jeudy, if one of those guys puts up a big game and you need them in the captain spot, then it most likely means that, Rypien's also having a good game as well. So, yeah, for that reason, I would play him, if I was playing a Broncos receiver at captain. But if I can only choose one of the two quarterbacks, if I'm building out my lineup and I have enough for Sam Darnold, I'm just going to play Sam Darnold. I do feel more confident in him than I do Brett Rypien. So my thoughts on the quarterbacks there. Now, these mid-range receivers, this is where I have a good amount of interest. Mainly Noah Fant, Jamison Crowder, Jerry Jeudy, the three guys I really like in this mid-range. So Noah Fant, he's been really good so far this season. We haven't gotten any monster games from him, but week 1 against Tennessee, he did have Drew Lock for that game. Had 5 catches, 81 yards and a touchdown, got targeted 6 times. And then week 2 against Pittsburgh, 4 catches, 57 yards and a touchdown. And even last week, didn't have the best game, but still got 10 targets, 5 catches for 46 yards. I mean, the volume is clearly there for Noah Fant. Honestly, he might be their number 1 receiver right now, even though he's not quote-unquote listed as a wide receiver. He's their number 1 target. Without Courtland Sutton, with him now out for the season, Noah Fant should be looking at a ton of volume every week. I do like him a lot here. I think at 9K, he makes a lot of sense as a captain play. Does have potential to go for, 20-plus Draftkings points. Wouldn't be surprised if he outscores the quarterbacks, and he's coming in, at a bit of a discount. So definitely like Noah Fant, probably one of my favorite options in that price range. And I also really like Jamison Crowder. So Jamison Crowder, he was limited in practice on Tuesday when I'm recording this video, but just reading the injury report and reading, the blurb, all signs point to him playing this week. It looks like he is going to be back. And if that's the case, I do have a lot of interest in Crowder because week 1, we saw him get he was massively involved in the offense week 1. 13 targets, 7 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown against the Bills, and then he got hurt. Didn't play week 2, didn't play week 3, so he's missed the last 2 games. But he is expected back for this game, and I'm assuming that he's not going to be limited or anything. I'm assuming he's going to be full go. And whenever Crowder, when he's healthy, he's actually shown that he can be a good receiver for, fantasy. Gets a lot of targets. He was targeted a ton by Sam Darnold last season, and I don't expect much to change this season, especially, now that Robbie Anderson's no longer on the team, without Le'Veon Bell to dump the ball off to. I mean, Crowder should be looking at massive volume once again this week, and at 8,200, he's someone that I like quite a bit, and probably one of my favorite plays overall definitely going to have a lot of him, or a lot of exposure to him at captain. And in those lineups, I will definitely be playing Sam Darnold because, like I said, if I'm playing a pass catcher, I normally want to get, or if I'm playing a pass catcher at captain, I normally want to get their quarterback in that lineup. So I really like Jamison Crowder here. He should be the number one receiver for the Jets. Brashad Perriman's still going to be out, so we don't have to worry about him taking targets away from Crowder. Braxton Berrios might get targeted some. They also have Chris Hogan, who, you never know if he's going to get targeted or not. He played like 80 or 85% of the snaps last week and didn't get a single target, so I don't really expect Chris Hogan to be involved much. Chris Herndon has been a big disappointment this season. I was expecting him to, have a breakout year, and he's just been so bad early on. Hasn't been running many routes. He's been blocking a lot, which, obviously is not great for his fantasy upside and his fantasy value. So I feel very confident that Crowder remains to get, or, continues to get heavy volume once again this week. I think 8 to 10 targets is a reasonable projection for him, and at 8,200, I like him quite a bit in that price range. And, Jerry Jeudy, you can also play. I'm not as confident in him as I am, Noah Fant and Jamison Crowder. But his volume's there as well. 8 targets week 1, 7 targets week 2, 9 targets week 3. Hasn't, put up a big game yet, but this is a guy that showed, a lot of upside in college when he was at Alabama. Great route runner, has a ton of speed. I wouldn't be surprised to see him post a big game, sooner rather than later. I don't know if he's going to do it with Brett Rypien under center, but against this Jets secondary, this is definitely a team you can beat over the top. So I have some interest in Jeudy. I do prefer Crowder. I feel a little bit better about Crowder for a little bit more salary, but obviously on a one-game showdown slate, I'm going to have exposure to both guys. Really, Fant, Crowder, Jeudy, I like all three of those guys a ton. Braxton Berrios, I'm not as high on. I think he's going to take a hit with Crowder back. Brashad Perriman is still going to be out, so I think, Berrios is going to be the number 3 receiver, or I guess the number 2 receiver. It'll be Crowder, Berrios, and then Chris Hogan. So, Berrios you could look to. I just feel better about Crowder. I feel better about Jeudy as well, and Judy's only a couple hundred more. So if I had the salary, I feel like I would just rather get up to those guys over Berrios. But I don't expect Berrios to just be cut out. He's still going to be involved, especially since since Brashad Perriman's still out. They're going to need someone to fill Perriman's role, and I do expect that to be Braxton Berrios. And with how much better he's looked, or with how better he's played over Chris Hogan, I think he's clearly the number 2 receiver right now. With Crowder back, Crowder should be the number 1. But Berrios is going to be the number 2 because Chris Hogan, he hasn't looked good at all. He's by far the number 3 receiver. So just my thoughts there. Now, looking at the running backs, Phillip Lindsay, this is a guy that does have a lot of upside, but I don't know if I want to play him on this slate, especially because he could be a bit limited here. No, he's not that cheap either. He's still $6,200. I'll just feel better getting up to some of those pass catchers. Lindsay's always a guy that has upside when he's fully healthy, but he's still going to be splitting carries with Melvin Gordon. Shouldn't get much volume. Week 1, he got hurt, obviously. He got 8 touches in that game before he did get hurt. Most weeks, he's probably going to get about 10 to 12 touches, and then Melvin Gordon will probably get like 12 to 14. I probably won't be on Lindsay at 6,200. I just feel like there's other guys that I'd rather go to. The Jets running backs, I don't feel really confident in them. They've been really splitting up the snaps so far this season. If we just look at their snap percentage last week with the Jets running backs, it was pretty much like a dead even split. You had Frank Gore play 41% of the offensive snaps. You had P. Ryan play 33%, and then you had Keelan Ballage play 30%. They're involved in all 3 of these guys. I really don't feel too confident in any of them. Frank Gore, I'm not playing. I just don't think Frank Gore is very good. The only way that he even gets there is if he scores touchdowns. He's very touchdown dependent. You're going to need him to score at least once, if not twice. And if that happens, it's probably going to be at the goal line. He's not going to break off a long run. He's just not that kind of guy. He's old. You're going to need him to, or you're going to need the Jets to get down to the goal line and Frank Gore to get, a goal line touchdown for him to be even a solid play at his price. And sure, that could happen, but that's probably not something that I'm going to bank on. Even if this dude gets 20 touches, he could give you 5 DraftKings points. He's just not very efficient, not going to be involved in the passing game. Just someone that I really don't want to play, even on a showdown slate. I guess if I was going to play one of the Jets running backs, I think it would probably be Keelan Ballage, just because he's more involved in the passing game. He's more explosive than Frank Gore. I guess he has at least some upside because he can catch balls out of the backfield. If they get down in this game, you could see Keelan Ballage much more involved than a guy like Frank Gore. Obviously, if they're passing, Frank Gore's not going to be out there. It's going to be Ballage, getting catches out of the backfield. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him get 4 or 5 targets. I don't think he's going to get much work through the ground, but he should be involved in the passing game. At 5,800, I still think he gives us a little bit more upside than a guy like Frank Gore. But I really don't feel too confident in any of the Jets running backs. I really don't want to play any of them. I'm probably just going to be fading them all in general. And I did that, last slate with the Ravens running backs, and that worked out. Just when you have teams when you have teams going with the committee and involving, 3 running backs, it's just so hard to pick which one's going to have the big game, if any of them do. When usually that's the case, I just tend to fade all the running backs. Committees are just not good for DFS. They're not good for fantasy. We need, workhorse running backs. I know we have a committee in Denver, but it's only a 2-man committee. It's pretty much just Gordon and Lindsey, whereas the Jets are involving 3 guys, and they're just splitting up the work even more. So, yeah, that's just my thoughts there. I'll probably be full fading the Jets running backs. I just don't see I don't have much confidence in any of them. The defense and the kickers I think are fine, especially in this game. In a low-scoring game like this, you could see the kickers be in the winning lineup. Normally, you don't see both kickers in the winning lineup, but if you want to play one of the two, I don't mind that. I don't mind the defenses either, because this could be a really sloppy game. You could see a lot of turnovers. The Jets' defense is only 4K against a third-string quarterback. I mean, that looks pretty good. I think the Jets' defense is definitely viable. Even the Broncos, if you want to go to them at 5,600, they feel a little bit more expensive, a little bit more than I would probably like to play. But the Jets' D, against Ripon, against a third-stringer, I think at 4K, they make plenty of sense. You could definitely look there. Chris Herndon I talked about, a guy that I was very high on heading into the season and just hasn't really been getting it done so far. 7 targets week 1, 4 targets week 2, 5 targets in week 3. Hasn't been running a ton of routes. He's been blocking a lot, which is a big concern. That's obviously, we don't get points in DFS for blocks. We get them for receptions. If he's not running a ton of routes and he's not involved in the passing game, then obviously he's not someone that you're going to feel too confident in DFS. But on a one-game showdown slate, I think there still is some upside for Chris Herndon. I still think this is a very athletic tight end, a great receiving tight end. He should be way more involved in the passing game than he is. I don't think he's going to be a guy that gets, 5 targets every week. I think we're eventually going to see him, get 7, 8 targets a week, especially with Perriman still out. Chris Herndon and Jamison Crowder should be the top 2 receivers for the Jets right now. And even though that's not the case, even though they're involved in Berrios way more, I still do have some interest in Herndon at 5,400. Like, if I had to play Herndon or the Jets or the Broncos defense, I'd probably just rather play Herndon for sure, over the Broncos D. I'd probably rather play Herndon over Ballage as well, if I had to choose between those guys. Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler we can talk about. So, Jerry Jeudy, obviously the number 1 receiver. Noah Fant going to be involved as well. But Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler should both get some targets. Last week, you saw Tim Patrick get 4 targets. KJ Hamler also, I believe, got 4 targets or 5 targets for him. If I just have to choose one of these 2 guys, I think I do prefer KJ Hamler. I just think he's the more athletic receiver, has big play upside. He's a pretty good route runner. He was a guy that I actually played in my main lineup last week who was minimum salary on the main slate. And, he got 5.8 Draftkings points, which is obviously not a great score, but when you're minimum salary, that doesn't really kill your lineup. I was still able to profit last week with Hamler in my lineup. Now, on this showdown slate, I think he's definitely viable just because Courtland Sutton is still out. We'll take a look at the snap counts for the Broncos last week with Sutton out and just see how it looks. So let's go to Denver and let's go to the wide receivers. Take a look at which wide receivers play, how many snaps. So KJ Hamler actually led the team in offensive snap percentage last week, 92% of the snaps played. Tim Patrick, 84%, Jerry Jeudy, 73%, and then Deshaun Hamilton, 19%, and then Cleveland and Spencer, 6% and 3%. But great to see that KJ Hamler actually led the team in snap percentage. He was on the field the most out of all the Broncos receivers. He didn't get the most targets, but he was, he had the opportunity being on the field for, 92% of the snaps. That's very encouraging. That's something that I do like to see. I think he's going to be close to an every down receiver. He's a guy that, like I said, a great route runner, has some speed, can break off a long play. Like at 4,800, honestly, I wouldn't mind taking a shot on him at captain just because I think, you play Tim Patrick or you play KJ Hamler at captain, you can really just play whoever you want. If you wanted to go with both quarterbacks, you could do that. If you wanted to pay up for Melvin Gordon, you could do that. You could easily fit in Fant, Crowder, Jeudy. Like, there's a lot of ways you could construct a lineup with, with a guy like KJ Hamler at captain. And I think he does have the upside here. He's eventually going to put up a big game, especially with him playing, over 90% of the snaps. The targets are going to come at some point. One of these weeks he's going to break off a long touchdown. He's going to, beat a corner deep, and it could come here against this Jets secondary, probably one of the worst secondaries in the league. So I really like KJ Hamler. Between him and Tim Patrick, I think I would prefer Hamler, but I think both guys are viable on this showdown slate. You do have the kickers as well for cheap you could play. If I have the salary, though, I think I would rather play Hamler and I would rather play Patrick over the kickers. Honestly, I think I would rather play the Jets defense over the kickers as well. But, by far my favorite values, like under 6K, are probably Patrick, or Hamler, Patrick, and Herndon, the guys I like most for cheap. Deshaun Hamilton, probably not going to be playing him. Chris Hogan, he played a lot of snaps, but, the dude's just not a good receiver at this point in his career. He showed some promise with the Patriots when he was with Tom Brady, but in Carolina last season, he really didn't do anything. Hasn't done anything so far with the Jets. I probably won't be going to Chris Hogan. Jamison Crowder coming back, that's even worse for Chris Hogan. I don't really want to go to him. I don't want to play Royce Freeman. Don't want to play P. Ryan. There's really no one else that I want to go to. I guess the one guy I want to mention is Josh Malone. So week 2, he actually got 6 targets, 4 catches for 16 yards. Not the best score overall, but he's $200. If you tell me that Josh Malone's going to get 6 targets again, I would have a good amount of interest in him. I do want to pull up their snap percentage last week. So obviously, for the Jets last week, Crowder and Perriman were both out. This week, though, Crowder is expected to play, but Perriman is going to remain out. So last week, their snap percentage was 81% of the offensive snaps for Braxton Berrios, 80% for Chris Hogan, 59% for Josh Malone, and then 45% for Cager. I don't even know who that is. But it was good to see Malone play 59% of the snaps. Obviously that number might go down now that Jamison Crowder is back. It's probably going to go down a good amount. But I still think he's going to be involved somewhat as their number 4 receiver. And with how poorly Chris Hogan has looked, maybe he could even outplay Chris Hogan and get in line as their number 3. At $200, if you bet out your lineup and you really, really like it and you need a punt somewhere, I don't mind throwing Josh Malone in there. It's risky. He could give you a 0, but in the chance that he gets maybe 4 or 5 targets and gets a couple catches, maybe gets 5 or 6 DraftKings points, you could see him be in the winning lineup at $200. So if I was going to play a punt guy, anyone down here, it probably would be Josh Malone. Just hoping that maybe he catches a couple balls, maybe somehow he gets into the end zone. We saw it on Monday night. Nick Boyle got a touchdown late in the game. And I can't remember if he was in the winning lineup or not. I don't think he was, but still, getting 7, 8 DK points out of a $200 guy, that is huge for your lineup, especially if a lot of the expensive guys do well. You're probably going to need them, and then you're obviously going to need a cheap guy to go along with them. So if you're forcing me to play anyone down here, it would probably be Josh Malone at $200. But yeah, guys, I think we covered the player pool. I think we broke it all down, from top to bottom, talked about all the playable guys. I do want to talk about some roster builds, look at roster construction real quick before we end the video. So I mentioned it, during the video. I think Jamison Crowder is probably my favorite play on this Showdown slate. I like him a lot as a captain play. I think he has, 20-plus point upside, which is what I'm looking for at my captain spot. So if we do go with Crowder as our captain, we want to correlate our lineups well. If we're assuming that Crowder has a big game, that most likely means that Sam Darnold is contributing as well. So we'll go ahead and plug in Sam Darnold with Crowder. And now we have 67.75 remaining per player. So a lot of ways we can go here. I think I do want to go ahead and plug in KJ Hamler as a value because I do like him a lot at 4,800. And now we can get in some of these mid-range guys. We can play Jerry Jeudy, who we talked about a lot. We can play Noah Fant as well. If we do plug in Jeudy and Fant, that leaves us enough to play a guy like Chris Herndon. So, that's a build that you could do right there that I do like quite a bit. You have 3 Denver pass catchers without their quarterback. Normally, I wouldn't feel great about that. Normally, if I'm playing 3 pass catchers from a team, I want their quarterback in that lineup. But I could see a situation where, Hamler, Jeudy, and Fant put up a decent outing and a guy like Ripon, isn't necessary. But we could maybe do a build where we try and get both quarterbacks in. So let's take all these guys out and then plug in both quarterbacks. We're obviously going to need some value, so let's go ahead and plug in KJ Hamler as our value play. We have 6K left. Once we go that route, we got 6K left for our last 2 spots, or 6K remaining per player for our last 2 spots. So if we want to get Fant, that would leave us enough to play, really no one that I like unless we were to punt with Josh Malone, but I don't think I want to do that. So let's drop down from Fant and go to Jerry Jeudy. That leaves us enough then to play the Jets defense, which we could do. I could see a situation where maybe the Jets force some turnovers. Ripon, a 3rd-string quarterback. I don't think he's going to be perfect here. He's probably going to make some mistakes. So, yeah, that's a build that you could do right there that I don't mind at all. Definitely think that's a viable strategy to go. If we wanted to full-on punt with Josh Malone, like I said, I guess we could go that route, play Melvin Gordon, and then we can get our punt play Josh Malone in there at $200. Another strategy you could look to, really that's just, depending on your risk adverse. Like if you don't mind taking the risk on Malone, go ahead and play him. If he finishes with a 0, I wouldn't be surprised. But if he gets you like 6 or 7 DK points, that could be enough at $200. So if I was playing multiple lineups, which I usually do on these showdown slates, I will for sure have, at least some exposure to Josh Malone. I think he wouldn't be someone that I would just X out of my player pool. Like I would definitely have him in at least, a small percentage of my lineups because I think he's going to be pretty low owned. I really don't expect anyone to go there. Should be the number 4 receiver, without Perriman. Could potentially, move his way up to the number 3 spot with how poorly Chris Hogan's looks. So, yeah, guys, so that's a build that I like with Jamison Crowder at captain. If you wanted to go with one of the quarterbacks at captain, normally I don't do that, but I wouldn't mind it here just because no one projects great in this game. So, like, if you wanted to play Sam Darnold at captain, usually if I'm playing a quarterback at captain, I want at least 2 of his pass catchers. So if I'm playing him, then I probably want Crowder in there. And then I probably want, either Berrios or Herndon. I think I'd rather play Herndon because he's cheaper. We can go with him, and now we got 68.33 remaining per player. So, like, if we wanted to get both quarterbacks in there, we could still easily do that. You could play Ripon, and then you could go down to, like, KJ Hamler as a value, and then you could play, like, Tim Patrick as well. So that's another build that I do like quite a bit. You have no exposure to the running games, but honestly, I don't love the running games from either side of this game. Like, I think I definitely want to get exposure to the passing game. I don't love the Jets running backs at all. Like, I'm probably going to be full fading them. Obviously, Melvin Gordon's viable, but he's really expensive. I don't know if it's worth paying that price for him, especially with, Phillip Lindsay back. So, yeah, this is a lineup that I do like quite a bit that you could also go with. I think that definitely makes sense. Playing Hamler and Patrick and then having no Judy, no Fant, that's a bit risky. If Ripon puts up a big game, is his production going to go to, just Hamler and just Patrick? That's unlikely, but, you can't just play everyone. You got to go cheap somewhere. And if we want to get both quarterbacks in there, it's going to be tough to play both quarterbacks with Fant and Judy, especially if we're playing, one of the 2 quarterbacks at captain. But, yeah, guys, I think that's, just kind of how I'm looking to approach this showdown slate. I think I'm going to have, some Sam Darnold at captain lineups. Definitely going to have Jamison Crowder at captain. I'll probably have some Fant and Judy at captain as well. And then if you want to take a shot on KJ Hamler at captain, like I did want to build out a lineup with him at captain just so we can see, what it gives us the salary to do. Obviously, if you're playing a Denver receiver at captain, you might want to get Ripon in there and pair them up, correlate them well. We could probably play both quarterbacks for sure. Could play, Jamison Crowder, get him in there with Darnold. And then, from here, we got a lot of salary to work with. If we want to just, go cheap with Hamler or go cheap with a guy like Patrick as well, that would leave us enough to pay up for a guy like Jerry Jeudy, or we could drop down from Patrick to one of the kickers, and then that would leave us enough to get in Noah Fant. That's another build that you could do. I'm trying to think if there's any mid-range guys. Like we could go Jeudy and maybe, obviously you're not playing any of the 6K guys, none of the backup quarterbacks, but you could go with like Jeudy and Balaj, or Jeudy and the Broncos defense, or Jeudy and Herndon as well. Another build that I do like quite a bit, leaving a little bit of salary on the table. I have no problems with that. Just give myself a little bit of a contrarian lineup. So, yeah, as you can see, like you can make some pretty good lineups with KJ Hamler at captain. I think the upside is there for Hamler. The opportunity is there right now with him playing like over 90% of the snaps, getting 6, 7, 8 targets a week. Hard to beat that when he's, as cheap as he is on this showdown slate. When he's almost as cheap as the kickers, I would definitely rather play Hamler there. So yeah, that's just the way I'm looking to go on the showdown slate, guys. I think my favorite captain plays are definitely Sam Darnold, Jamison Crowder, Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. Those are the guys I like most at captain. In terms of like the running game, like I said, probably I'm fine playing Melvin Gordon, but I'm gonna probably be full fading the Jets running game. Probably not gonna play much Phillip Lindsay either. Really just want to focus on the passing game from both sides. Obviously Crowder, the quarterbacks, Crowder, Fant, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, Herndon, Hamler. Those are the guys that, I really like the most. If you want to play the kickers, you want to play the defenses, that's fine. Normally, I just don't go out of my way to play them. This could be a game, though, where you do see, obviously a lot of turnovers. Really could be a sloppy game, could be low scoring, and, that could mean maybe the defenses are performing a little bit better than you would expect them to. So, yeah, guys, I think we broke it all down. I think we covered this showdown slate from top to bottom, talked about the player pool, talked about roster construction. Yeah, I think we broke it all down. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I really do appreciate you watching. If you did enjoy, hit that like button before we get out of here, guys. I always appreciate the likes. Hit the subscribe button as well. Be sure to click that notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. You'll never miss out on any of my new videos. And if you would like to get more content from me, if you do enjoy the videos I put out on YouTube, I do have more content available on Patreon. You can check that out. Link down below in the description. If you want to get more content from me, I do have stuff on Patreon, link down below. But best of luck on the Showdown slate, guys. Hope you guys win some money. Good luck, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.